We're pretty fortunate in our industry because fitters, plumbers, fab shop workers, and service techs don't need to use respiratory protection all that often. With adequate ventilation and safe work practices, respiratory hazards are rarely present in large enough concentrations to concern us.
But there are situations where protection is needed, and when we do need it, we need to get it right.
There are a wide range of potential respiratory hazards in our industry. These could include hot work fumes that emit heavy metals like hexavalent chromium, zinc, and manganese, certain minerals in dust form like friable asbestos and pulverized silica, chemicals that we use in our work areas like ammonia. Even some living organisms like Legionella can be a problem for us when they become airborne.
So, when respiratory hazards exists in a significant concentration and ventilation is inadequate or oxygen is insufficient in your work area, you'll need respiratory protection.
Before you put on a respirator, there's a critical process to follow. It ensures that you're properly protected from the airborne hazards you might face. In this respirator safety training program, you'll learn about several parts of this process. They include your own personal responsibilities, hazard assessments, respirator selection, medical evaluations, fit testing, proper respirator use, cleaning and sanitizing, maintenance, change schedules, and storage. One of the most important components of respirator safety is understanding user responsibilities. In addition to the training you receive from this video, your company will also go through its own written respiratory protection program with you. Let's start with your responsibilities as a respirator user. To start with, you're responsible for wearing the proper respirator whenever and wherever the task you're performing makes it necessary, and you'll need to wear it precisely as you're trained to wear it. You're also responsible for properly maintaining, cleaning, sanitizing, and storing your respirator.
And you'll have to inform your supervisor and request a new respirator if there's a change in your physical condition that could affect the fit of your respirator, such as a significant weight gain or loss or significant dental work. Also, tell your supervisor if you have any concerns about respiratory protection.
Now, let's take a look at hazard assessments.
The type of respirator depends on several factors, but mostly on the type and quantity of the airborne hazards you'll be facing. Your company can't select the most suitable type of respirator for you until it obtains that information, completing a hazard assessment. The assessment will identify hazardous substances that could become airborne while you're performing the specified task.
For example, your company will evaluate all applicable chemical safety data sheets for information on potential hazards and recommendations for respiratory protection. The assessment will also determine where the potential exposures could occur. It will also quantify the airborne hazardous substances, which is critically important information for choosing the proper type of respirator. For example, if the results show that a concentration of hexavalent chromium from the fumes in a stainless steel welding operation is within a certain range, you could use a half-face air purifying respirator. However, larger concentrations might require you to use a full-face respirator.
The bottom line is, hazard assessment will dictate what type of respirator you'll need, and your company will make that call for you.
Now let's take a quick look at respirator selection, so you'll know what to expect. Depending on what type of airborne hazards will be present, how much of those substances will be present in airborne concentrations, and how much oxygen is available where you'll be working, your company will select one of three main types of respirators. A positive pressure atmosphere-supplied respirator where clean breathing is supplied into your breathing zone. A positive pressure self-contained breathing apparatus where the user is provided clean breathing air from an external source, such as a tank or oxygen generator. a negative air purifying respirator, which has changeable filters, cartridges, or canisters that purify the breathing air for you. Fortunately, most of the time, air purifying respirators are all that we need for mechanical construction, fabrication, and service work. So that's where we'll focus our training efforts today. Once the hazards are known and the respirator type is selected, you won't be able to start work until you get medical clearance. Let's see how the medical evaluation process works. Before you begin work with your respirator, a qualified healthcare provider will provide a medical evaluation to ensure that you're healthy enough to work wearing your respirator safely. This is done with a simple questionnaire that you complete and send to your company's designated healthcare provider. The healthcare provider will evaluate the completed questionnaire along with detailed information from your employer,
such as a description, the respiratory hazards that you'll be facing, and the type and weight of the respirator that's been selected for the job.
Most of the time, that's all it takes. But if after providing the evaluation, the healthcare provider has concerns about your abilities to perform your job safely while wearing a respirator, you may be required to have a physical exam, including pulmonary function testing.
And stop. Excellent.
Once you're deemed healthy enough to work while wearing a respirator, you'll need to get properly fitted. You'll be an active participant in the fit testing process. Fit testing ensures your respirator fits properly. If it doesn't have a good seal with your face, you could inhale hazardous substances. There are two types of fit tests that could be performed by your company. One is a qualitative test, which means you'll simply determine whether or not you can smell or taste a non-toxic test substance while wearing your respirator. If not, the seal passes the test and you're good to go. But if so, you'll have to select a different size or brand of respirator and try the fit test again. The other type is a quantitative fit test using specialized equipment.
This is all to make sure that the mask is the appropriate size and fit for you.
Most mechanical service companies use the qualitative test unless the identified hazards and type of respirator selected dictate that a quantitative test must be performed. But either way, expect to play a major role in the process.
In fact, you'll have to perform a series of exercises throughout fit testing, including normal breathing, deep breathing, turning your head from side to side, moving your head up and down, and talking. Whoever is administering the fit testing procedures for your company will make sure you do everything you're supposed to do. But even after you're properly fitted for a respirator, you still need to know how to use the respirator properly. The most important thing about proper use is adhering to your company's respiratory protection program. You can access the written program anytime you want. All you have to do is ask your supervisor.
You'll also have to perform positive pressure user seal checks each and every time you put your respirator on, even during the fit testing process. But first, make sure you put your respirator on correctly.
Hold the respirator in your hands with the outside of the nose piece against the tips of your fingers. Place the respirator over your mouth first, then nose, and pull the strap up and over your head. Tighten the straps if you need to, but be sure they're not so tight that they distort the shape of the respirator and affect the seal. To perform the negative pressure user seal check, close off the inlet openings in the canisters or cartridges with the palms of your hands, or, if necessary, you can use filter seals or latex or nitrile gloves. Inhale gently so the facepiece collapses in. Hold your breath for 10 seconds. If the facepiece remains collapsed in and no leakage is detected, then the respirator has a suitable seal. To perform a positive pressure user seal check, close off the exhalation valve with the palm of your hand and exhale gently into the facepiece. If a positive pressure builds up inside the facepiece with no leakage around the seal, then you're good to go. You'll probably have to remove the exhalation valve cover to perform this check on most respirators. Just be sure to replace it before you start to work. Anytime you need to clean your respirator, change the filters, cartridges, or canisters, replace parts, or inspect it, Be sure to leave the work area beforehand, and be sure to let your supervisor know what you're doing. Your air purifying respirator will need to be cleaned and sanitized on a regular basis. To complete this process, take your respirator to the designated cleaning location. Remove filters, cartridges, or canisters, and disassemble the respirator. Wash the facepiece and all other parts, except for the filters, cartridges, or canisters, with a mild detergent and warm water. Then rinse it thoroughly with clean, warm water. Wipe the respirator parts down with specially made wipes that your company provides for you and place them in a designated clean area to dry out. Put the respirator back together and be sure to replace any defective parts that you discover during reassembly. Place it in a clean, dry, resealable plastic respirator storage bag so it won't get damaged, and it's ready to go the next time you need it. Your respirator needs to be properly maintained to continue working effectively. So let's take a look at respirator maintenance. The most important part of respirator maintenance is performing frequent inspections. In order to find inconspicuous defects, you'll have to look over your respirator very carefully. Here's what to look for. When you're inspecting the facepiece, look for cracks, tears, holes, distortion in the rubber, and cracked or loose lenses if you're inspecting a full face respirator. Be sure to look the head straps over carefully too. You're primarily looking for breaks, tears, and broken buckles. When you're inspecting the valves, first just make sure the valves are there to begin with. Then look for dirt and built-up residue, as well as cracks and tears. If you find any defective parts, inform your supervisor and be sure to replace them immediately. Finally, you'll want to ensure that your filters, cartridges, or canisters are in good condition and still capable of working properly. Inspect them carefully and replace them if you identify any defects whatsoever. But even if you don't see any defects, it doesn't mean that the filtering media doesn't need replacing. Let's go over change schedules for air purifying respirators.
With air purifying, you'll need to replace filters and cartridges anytime you experience difficulty breathing, they become wet, or anytime you smell or taste a chemical substance. Those are all indicators that the filtering is no longer working properly.
If you do suddenly start to taste or smell a substance, leave the work area and perform negative and positive pressure user seal checks to ensure that your respirator is still properly sealed to your face. If it is, change the filters and cartridges immediately. And be sure to learn and follow the respirator manufacturer's recommendations regarding filter and cartridge change schedules. Your supervisor can provide that information for you. It's also very important that you verify that the colors of the respirator filters and cartridges you'll be using match up properly with the exposures that you'll be facing. Each color is specific to a type of airborne hazard. If you have any questions about the color coding, be sure to check with your supervisor. One other thing you really need to do to keep your respirator in top condition is to store it properly. So let's take a look at storage. As soon as you finish working with your respirator, always place it in a clean, dry, resealable plastic respirator storage bag and make sure the seal is properly closed. Then place the bag in a cool, clean, and dry storage area like a gang box or a locker where it can't get damaged before you need it again.
Just a couple more things before you start to work while wearing your respirator. Respirators have their limitations, especially air purifying respirators.
To work effectively, the respirator has to properly seal to your face. That's why any facial hair that affects the seal has to be removed.
Anything else that would be a deal breaker too. Workers with scars, jewelry, or anything else that prevents a good seal may not be able to wear certain types of respirators. Another thing to remember about air purifying respirators, not enough oxygen in the atmosphere to begin with. It won't keep you safe.
A confined space is a good example of a place where there may not be enough oxygen to safely support life. When that's the case, you'll have to hang up your air purifying respirator and switch to supplied atmosphere or self-contained respiratory protection. Another limitation is the filtering media itself. Filters, cartridges, or canisters made to protect you from one type of hazard may not work against another. For example, organic vapor filtering cartridges designed to protect you from ammonia gas won't filter out asbestos fibers. You have to make absolutely sure you're using the right filtering media for the job.
We don't need to use respiratory protection very often in the mechanical trades, but when respirators are required, using them safely is pretty easy.
Make sure you meet all of your responsibilities as a respirator user. Use your respirator properly every time it's needed. Perform your user seal checks. Keep it clean, sanitized, and properly maintained. Change filters, cartridges, or canisters as required, and store it properly whenever you're not using it.
It's important to be aware of respiratory hazards in our industry. Whether you work in mechanical construction, the fabrication shop, or perform service work, you can take the steps to work safely when respiratory hazards are present. Ultimately, it's up to you to make respirator safety happen.